The offseason has been long for fans of Michigan State football, and even longer for the players and coaches inside the program. What is entertainment for you and me, these players live day in and day out. Last season saw a head coach fired after the second game, while coaches struggled to keep players together, and players were not put in the best position to succeed. Once the season mercifully ended, Michigan State football would have to journey through a long offseason. They would have to reflect where they were, where they wanted to go, and how could they accomplish that. It's been almost 9 months since last season ended for the Spartans. Their opener against the Owls of FAU is right around the corner, and a new coaching staff is in place. The roster has been revamped, and a new sense of identity has been established. Low ego, high output. Michigan State football had to reestablish itself this offseason. Did they accomplish that? Before we look at that, let's recap the 2023 season one final time. Michigan State beat Central Michigan in the season opener 31-7. Connor Stalions was on the sidelines, and I'm sure that'll be the last time we hear of him. Next weekend, the Richmond Spiders would come to town. Despite their cool name, they'd lose handedly to the Spartans. Also, Mel Tucker would be fired later that night for being a sex pest. Michigan State would then be bombed by Washington the following week, and I don't really remember much about the Maryland game, but Michigan State did lose. Cooper DeJean's punt return touchdown would seal the win for the Hawkeyes, sending the Spartans into the bye week with a loss. Somehow, it gets worse after the bye week. Kane Hauser would get his first career start versus Rutgers, and he would throw 2 touchdowns. And through a comedy of errors, including a kickoff recovery, Rutgers would come back from a 24-point deficit. Michigan would come to town next week, feeling persecuted over their cheating, and would blow the doors off the Spartans. Frankly, I'm surprised Harbs didn't run the score up more. Those black unis looked sick though. Michigan State would go to Minnesota where they'd only score 6 points off 2 turnovers. I think we all know whose fault that is. Minnesota would then run all over the Spartans on their way to the win. Nebraska would come to town at 5-3 looking for their 6th win against a lowly Michigan State team and clinch their first bowl game since 2018. Naturally, Michigan State would win, snap their losing streak, and Nebraska would finish 5-7, missing a bowl game. Michigan State would then play in Columbus, get blown out, and trick a lot of Ohio State fans that Kyle McCord is good. Michigan State would travel to Indiana to play the Hoosiers. Foster and Carr would have spectacular catches on their way to a win. Finally, Michigan State concluded the season versus Penn State at Ford Field. This game was 13-0 at halftime, which said more about Penn State than Michigan State. Michigan State's quarterback 4 was getting sacked by Penn State's NFL defensive ends, and that's how the season mercifully ends. Casting a wide net, Alan Haller would spend the season vetting coaches in their interest for the MSU head coaching job. Shortly after the Penn State game, MSU's new head coach would be announced. Jonathan Smith of Oregon State had accepted the Spartans' offer and was officially the new head coach of Michigan State. His introduction to Michigan State was quick but subtle. He took in the magnitude of the situation, knowing he'd have to leave his alma mater to take on a whole new challenge. While at Oregon State, Jonathan Smith had a steady ascension and would become one of the most physical teams of the now defunct Pac-12. The community was excited for Smith, but trust needed to be earned after the previous coach's tenure. He'd bring 6 coaches with him from Oregon State: secondary coach Blue Adams, associate head coach Keith Bonuffa, offensive line coach Jim Mahalchek, and they say he's a respected offensive line coach, but that's what they said about the last guy, and he made this. And that guy is now at Alabama. Smith also brought in defensive line coach Langi Suiaunoa, tight ends coach Brian Wozniak, and offensive coordinator Brian Lindgren. Defensive coordinator Joe Rossi came over from Minnesota, and rush ends coach Chad Wilt was brought in from Indiana. And MSU alumnus Demetrius Martin came home from Oregon to coach the cornerbacks. The only holdover from the previous staff is wide receiver coach Courtney Hawkins, who is also an MSU football alumnus. Michigan State lost 38 transfers to the transfer portal, including a starting safety, 2 starting defensive tackles, 2 starting quarterbacks, a starting wide receiver, and a starting tight end. However, Coach Smith and company had 24 transfer portal additions of their own.
caffeinated. I was stargazing. Life goes on, I need all my babies. Woke up looking for the broccoli. High key, keep a horn on me, that could my seat. IP, ownership, the blueprint is by me. Mr. Get Off, I get off at my feet.
What's the password?
I see dead people.
The last thing I want to talk about is culture. To be successful, football teams must have quality players, quality coaching, and show up day in and day out. But there's a bond that must be established between teammates. Now, I don't know what went on inside the football program last year. I can't comment on the culture in 2023. But it appears Smith is doing a good job resetting that and focusing on connections between players and staff. Each player is an individual that has their own aspirations, but most build connections with teammates to achieve a greater goal. Once these bonds are built, they allow players to correct each other, support each other, and they know they can rely on each other when things get tough. A stronger culture allows a team to improve together. Football season is once upon East Lansing. Spartan Stadium will soon be filled with thousands of fans with cautious optimism that Michigan State should be better this fall. Coach Smith has made plenty of good moves this offseason, from quality coaching hires to talented roster additions. However, winning the offseason only means so much. Can he win it in season? It'll be time to prove it soon. Go Green.